public service announcement. We're going to take a deep dive into driver technology in this video. We've got two of the greatest minds in golf. Hold on to your hats. This is going to be a deep one. So, high MOI drivers, they're the best and we should all have one, right?
Yeah, some of us should have it.
Okay, sounds like it's a bit of a bigger conversation.
It's maybe a pitcher conversation.
Unfortunately, we haven't got a picture here right now, but we'll do our best.
Okay.
So we're here with Dr. Tom Mase and Mark Timms. We should call you Dr. Mark Timms at some point. You need to go and get that done. You're both experts in your field. We're going to talk all about MOI. I mean, as deep as we can go, and you know, relate it back to the golfer. Let's always think about that as we go in today, and really help people understand, you know, what does MOI do for me? Is that all I should be thinking about? And how does that affect my driver purchase going forward? So I'm going to let you take center stage here and tell us what we need to know.
Okay. Well, MOI is moment of inertia. If we look at what inertia comes into play, we've got Newton's second law. Force equals mass times acceleration.
Yeah, and to explain inertia, you talk about resistance to twisting, essentially, correct?
That's next. So
Jumping ahead.
F equals ma is all about pushing something linear acceleration. So the mass is what slows it down when we push with a similar force. And we weigh the club like this, we get a weight. It doesn't matter how we turn the club. We can weigh it.
Still the same mass.
It's still the same mass. And if we look over here, the mass is really just a scalar in this equation that we have. And so it's a single number, a single scale like this. Twisting, though, is another story.
Right.
And so basically, resistance to twisting this way is how fast it accelerates when it twists this way. Well, that's different than this way because this body is not symmetric.
Right.
We no longer have a point mass. And so we have to bring in a lot more terms to describe that motion. It seems like not that big a deal, but if you look at the equation sheet, there's this whole matrix that comes into play. So it's sum of the moments equals I times alpha, which is the angular acceleration. And so the angular acceleration is a vector, but it takes a whole matrix there, 9 different terms to describe that. And all the fuss in golf now is over these two terms, this IXX and IYY.
And just quantify the I for us, that's inertia.
It's the moment of inertia by definition. And so those two numbers are, the IYY is the heel toe.
Yep. Right. So it's on the y-axis moving left to right. So if you were to strike one in the heel or the toe, it would twist away.
That's correct. And then the IXX is up and down. So you hit it low on the face, you get a little more spin. You hit it high on the face, you get a little less spin for that's, some people try to hit it up there high.
Yeah, we used to years
their
ago,
spin.
especially
Yeah.
when Callaway first came out with the titanium drivers. Kind of high toe was your sweet spot.
So that's what we're talking about. We're taking just a little piece of the entire moment of inertia components. There's 6 independents, and we're taking 2 and adding them together.
Right. It's a bit of creative accounting, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you talked about 6,000 MOI, which everyone talks about because the USGA limit,
Right.
which is just
Heel
the
toe.
original one we're talking about.
Yeah.
Now, if you had another one in there, you had those two together, you get a bigger number. But that doesn't necessarily mean that number's now 10,000, which is definitely misleading, right? So the USGA limit's 6,000 on that one axis.
Right. And I think that to get to 10,000, it's like there's heel toe, and so you've got heel toe forgiveness, and it's like, oh, you also want, up down forgiveness as well. And so they've basically just added those two numbers together.
And the advantage of the up-down one, which is there's also some roll and bulge and other things going on with how the center of gravity is lined up. But, that changes spin a lot as it goes up and down the face. As you kind of know, when you hit the ball low on the face, it spins a little more and rises. And everyone talks about that, high on the center to get those high things that don't spin.
And a lot of this
there's more to it than that.
Yeah.
Is about the net result of all of this is kind of gear effect for the most part, right? And
right.
Potentially some start line. But like you were just saying, Mark, is within here is a center of gravity, and there is a mass and a weight placement around this shape.
Right.
And as the ball impacts certain parts of the head, which are offset from exactly where the center of gravity is, the club starts to work around that point.
It rotates around the center of gravity because that creates a moment. That however far away that is, that's a force acting at a distance away. That's a moment that twists a golf club head.
Now here's a question for you. So if you want a more draw bias driver, which you want the CG more towards the heel that creates the more draw spin, doesn't that hurt your MOI, which isn't necessarily a bad thing for some people?
That's true, and if we look at measuring the MOI with the weights that manufacturers give in different positions, we find that that's the lowest MOI in the heel position or to help the draw is the lowest
Interesting.
MOI position. So, back to measuring it, this we just set on a scale, and the manufacturers, when they make a club, the computer-aided engineering tools, that gives them all the MOI terms, all the mass, and where the CG is located.
And you're talking about before they design it, before they even print it or make a mold for it or anything else. It's just in the design mode itself.
A theoretical CG.
Yeah, exactly right. And,
exactly.
And not only that, maybe before they're even building a part, they're probably iterating with finite elements, doing the simulations of impact, saying like, oh no, the CG has to move here. So they're doing a lot of steps before they even make a prototype here. But like I said, this is easy. This one is a scale that measures the MOI, and you can see it just twists. There's a wire in there that acts like a torsional spring. And if you have the bigger inertia that's there, the slower this is going to go. The slower period it goes translates to a higher MOI.
slower period. Yes,
think about
right,
it like the
that's
old
right.
wooden drivers, right? They had a lead weight in the bottom. If you stack that on here with all the weight in the center, it's going to move really quickly.
Quick, right.
Same thing with the skater thing. When you put your
Put your
arms
arms
out,
out,
it slows
right.
down, they bring them together, it goes faster. So we're trying to get the weight as far away from the CG, to the edges as possible to stop that rotation.
So I just want to go back one step a little bit. I mean, just so everyone knows, this is an MOI machine.
Yeah, exactly right. This is Inertia Dynamics. It's a fancy machine. It measures. You put a club on a gram scale and you get 204.5. 204.5.
Yeah.
I mean, it nails it.
$20 scale will do that for you.
Right. Well, this is
that's-
five figures scale.
right.
But this thing nails the MOI down here. And for aerospace and all sorts of things, these are required to be. They need to know exactly what the dynamics are for everything that you're putting up into space.
Can you just explain a little bit about why we have it up on this platform with all these different spots? Now, it's kind of my understanding, and this would be a layman's terms, you don't know exactly where the CG, although we do have a CG machine to measure that. So basically, you're just moving it around spaces, and you want to catch the CG somewhere in the middle of that, and then you're taking an average of those to kind of figure out what the number is. Is that
that's
ballpark?
right? And you can see that there's a lot of different holes here that we can move it, and basically it's like if measure it here, 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 and you're going to have the center of gravity
Somewhere in the middle of that.
somewhere in the middle of that.
Right.
Yeah, we measure in all these different spots, and then we'll get plot those up, and where it's a minimum is going to be where the CG is located, and where we take the moment of inertia term.
We've done this for years, right? So we're starting to do this again now, but we did this, me and Tom did this way back in Hot Sticks Technologies days,
Yeah.
which was, decades ago. But, we got to look at a lot of different things to determine how good a golf club is and who it fits. MOI is one of them, yeah. Our robot testing with all the different points we hit and see where it goes is another one. We look at CG and a bunch of other things and its spin characteristics. So there's a whole bunch of different things you need to kind of look at all independently.
Yeah.
They all have some effect, some more than others, but you got to look at a lot of different things to really categorize a driver.
So guide us down that road a little bit, Tom.
Okay, this has the red dots in this figure are positions on this fixture up here, and
So within a fixture like this,
Right.
we're moving it across the little nodules that are coming out.
that's right. This is the old USGA fixture for measuring MOI, and you put this in different places, which in essence is moving the club head around like that.
Right.
And from that era, club heads are bigger now, so
Right.
we had to add some rows
Gotcha.
into it. And so I was like, wow, we're not going to capture the CG
Right.
in this. And so we added some rows on here, and it added a lot of work. I was really unfortunate, but you have to do what you have to do sometimes.
Right.
So these red dots are where we made the measurements. And then the measurement that's made is the moment of inertia in grams centimeter squared, and a surface is fit through that. And then from that surface, we can find where it's a minimum. And then where it's
That's about the CG.
that's where the CG is.
Right.
And that's the value that the I is
Okay.
about the CG.
Yeah.
And so what we're talking about is like in my equation back there, I had a bar over the I, and that means about the center of gravity. I bar usually means this is about the center of gravity. Because you can see from this figure, you get a different inertia about different axes, even though you're rotating it up still about this. If you move it around these different axes, you get different numbers.
Yeah.
And so it's about the CG, which is the one we really want. So
I think the interesting thing this year is that the 10K story has kind of emerged, but this has been thought of from club design standpoint for a long, long time. This is nothing new.
no, absolutely not. And I mean, I've been a long time in this industry, and I actually think I have a patent on inertia in the clubs somewhere back there, talking about products of inertia as well. The other inertia terms besides the two we're talking about today. So it's always been a concern, and I'm kind of happy because it used to be just nerds like us down in the trenches of
now they're marketing
R&D
it, everybody else
that
wants to know
even
what's
knew
going
what
on.
this was.
Right.
Yeah.
But now we're the technology is getting so much better. Every year there's tons of smart people like me that are grinding on these products in all these companies. So I'm happy that the word got out. It's like, hey, there's a lot to this.
Right.
So let's, thinking about a driver, we're just talking about drivers really today. Obviously, this is kind of applicable for any golf club, but I know you've got a figure on here that's going to help us maybe look at the two axes that we've talked about, the left, right, and the up and down axis, and kind of help us understand how a family of golf clubs might live on these axes. Because when we're looking at 10K, and we're talking about 10K nowadays, like Mark said, maybe creative accounting, we've come up with this number, but it's really only applicable to one end of the scale of what's possible with driver design, right?
That's right. And the figure I have up here are a couple axes. One on the left, the MOI XX is going to be our
Maybe the launch axis, maybe?
yeah, this axis. YY is going to be the
Offline.
heel toe axis. And so this is kind of a design space for drivers. And so, most companies come up with, 2 or 3 models. And what they're doing is they're trying to fill this design space for products for different people, different swings. And tour players, there could be tour players that want all different kinds that work for them and that work for their swings.
All three are on tour.
And I think that might be the most important sentence in driver fit-in and this whole MOI conversation now is that this is a design space and it doesn't matter where you are on this scale, and we'll talk about areas that you might be in, but there is not one point on that scale that is the best driver.
No,
If there was, each kind of manufacturer will need one driver.
One driver,
and most
right.
of them have 3 or 4 right now.
Perfect.
Right? And even
But-
a few tour models.
but the reason to get fit is there might be one driver for you.
There you go.
Exactly.
We need
That's
a
the hard
tagline
part.
on that.
Yeah, because you try the different areas, try the different clubs, and you might go like, wow, this really works for me. And so back to the figure here, hit 6,000 along here. That's the limit, right?
Right,
5,950 actually, and so you might say, well, let's start with.
Well, the USGA has not yet put a limit on the XX axis.
Okay.
right?
I guess they're placing less value on that as the up-down ball
No,
flight.
it's like anything else. They didn't think about it at the time, probably. I think obviously this is the most important one, and everybody talked about, hook and fade. Obviously, spin changes. The other way is not as big a critical deal. You still got to find the balls in the fairway.
Yeah.
So that's the one they put the most emphasis on, and it's probably true. That is the most important one.
And I think as we'll discuss later, there are other changes that happen when you go after. These parameters are not independent. When you change the MOI, you're probably affecting where the CG is located. And so you may say, oh, are they going to limit that? Well, maybe they don't have to, because no one would want a CG back as far as is required to get that kind of moment of inertia in that axis.
So can you let's plot an atypical family of drivers on this graph right now, starting with the 10K. Where would the 10K sit on this graph?
So the 10K, I mean, all you have to do is add these two numbers, 6,000 and 4,000.
Yep.
It's going to be like right up in here.
Okay.
That we'd have. And then if you have 10K with some movable weights, then you might shift a little bit. You move the weights.
Move it down a little bit.
You move the weights to the draw position, which is more heel bias, and that's going to drop it down a little bit. And there might be another position right here. Usually this top position, this is going to be the weight back.
Right.
The back weighted is going to give you the highest MOI.
So now let's go to the other end of the scale and let's think of the lowest spinning, small, maybe a 430cc head, really, really forward CG. Where does that plot on this graph?
Right. That's going to be down in here somewhere. And again,
There's some movable weights, so you can probably move it around a
movable
little
weights are going to shuffle that around. The movable weights can change the moment of inertia like 500-600 grams centimeter squared, and so the manufacturers they have this all figured out on the CAD before they even make it.
Right.
And so this is a no-brainer. And then what if neither of those is for you? Then probably a company would want to have a driver working in here somewhere.
Right.
And as we see, most companies these days have 3 models.
That's right.
Right.
And
there's a reason for that.
there is a reason for that. And it's like it goes across all spectrums. Tour guys want different drivers. Regular guys want and should want and need different drivers. And all the way through. High handicaps,
Figure as you can get it.
the same way.
Yeah.
And that's not like the high MOI is for high handicaps. That's not true.
Right.
It's for somebody who likes the feel of a center of gravity that's back a little ways. The ones that we've measured, the high MOI drivers have like a CG that's like 1.2 centimeters behind the shaft axis.
Right, okay. That's a high MOI.
There's a high MOI. The low MOI is like 0.8.
So there's only not even half a centimeter between the CG location.
Okay, I misspoke on that. It's not centimeters that the CG is back. It's 1.2 inches for a 10K driver, and like about 0.8, 0.7 away from the shaft axis for
That makes sense.
the upfront lower MOI.
So you're moving
quite a
the
lot.
MOI about,
You're
losing the CG about that far.
That's a huge amount of movement for the CG. When you consider you can move the weights around there, that moves the CG a tiny amount,
Right.
and it really affects the ball flight. So you can only imagine moving it like 0.3, 0.4 inches. It's drastically different drivers, and the ball shape is going to be very different for you.
I'll take the blame for that one. That was American inches versus British centimeters. It
We're
was
all
entirely
confused.
my fault.
I'm not sure which side I'm on either.
No, this is our mixed systems.
Well, we're back on track.
Yeah, you're talking about moving all these weights around and stuff on the outside of this, and you can change in the CG and everything grammatically. But the weights are relatively small compared to the rest of the weight of the head.
Yeah.
You got a 200 gram head, and you're moving 5 grams here and there. Not a huge difference. And you're not moving it to the extremes either. It's not going from here to the front.
Right.
It's just going from here to here. So.
And maybe that's what your graph is showing a little bit. When you're looking at movable weight technology and you're looking at maybe those 3 triangular plots, you're only nudging the CG around within its area. You're not all of a sudden, sorry, back onto your last one with the graph.
Oh yeah.
You're not, I know we're talking about MOI here, but CG and MOI are kind of tied together in this scale too, right? That movable weight technology isn't suddenly pushing you to 10K.
That's right. When you increase out here, you're probably pushing the CG back. So this is a deeper CG.
Which generally creates higher launch.
Higher spin for the most part.
And more spin a little bit.
That's right. And then here you're getting a forward CG, and that's going to be workability, better ball speed.
And generally lower spin rate.
And lower
if you remember
spin rate.
Slider a couple of years ago, everybody talked about lofting up. Because that big sliding piece that Taylormade came out with actually was pretty far forward in the
It was
face.
right up under what
It was
their
right in
speed
here.
slide
Right.
is now.
You put that weight and all those channels in there, you basically move the CG forward.
Yeah.
So that lowers launch.
Yep.
So you got to loft up to do that. But the positive to that is it really drops spin down.
Right.
So there's always trade-offs.
And I think this, where we're at right now, is the nuts and the bolts of the conversation about where MOI is. 10K is great for a group of people. And so is maybe, I mean, do you, without putting you too much on the spot, what would be considered super low MOI current driver?
I think there's some products that are like, 4,000, 3,000.
That's your total, the two added together.
4,000 on the on the
heel
weighing
toe,
axis.
yeah. So it's
pretty
7,000 total.
7,000. Okay.
Yeah.
So there you go.
It's in the 7,000s is going to be.
Still a good driver,
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah.
And still some of the best drivers that played on tour right now are probably in that range.
Exactly. And I said the 4 and 3 because it's like I'm almost like, no, I'm not going to add those together.
The scientist in you is coming out
I'm
here.
like,
Separate numbers.
show me an equation where those two are added together in physics.
That's the creative accounting part, I think.
Yeah.
To some extent.
Well, let's link it a little bit back and try and bring your knowledge in here, Mark, as well. Of okay, so these things are tied together. MOI and CG are certainly tied together, and now that kind of brings in a club fitting portion of it, right? Well, if you are wanting to move the ball more, in terms of I want to move it more right to left or more left to right, you're going to err on the side of a lower MOI driver for that guy?
Yeah, in general, that would be the case. There's a lot of other variables, and some of them are unseen, right? People just react differently to different shapes and looks, and shafts and stuff as well. So there's a lot of other variables, but in general, yeah. If you like to work the ball and all that stuff, a lower CG driver is going to allow you to do that, or a lower MOI driver is going to allow you to do that easier.
Yeah. So going into club fitting, bringing all of this science, technology into club fitting is really like when you're with your fitter and you're saying, hey, I like the smaller head shapes, but you're misstriking the driver off center a lot and you are, moving the golf ball around in the air a lot and you're trying to narrow it down. You can't have those two things come together necessarily. The science and the math don't add up.
If you really want a forgiving driver, you're not going to get the small tour taped, better looking head than you might think.
So there's all these components that come into how the manufacturers are able to create the plots on that graph, and that is governed by some rules and then material capabilities. So do you know the USGA limit is a box, right? The driver head has to fit in a 5x5.
I think that's it. I don't know the rule exactly, but there's a limit. Yeah.
So the 5x5 box is pretty much taken up with these 10K drivers. They're filling the box.
Yeah.
And so that's why they look bigger, is because they have to be to hit this number.
Yeah.
But you've got some other components that come into driver design that are just as important.
Right, and we were talking about a design space that had the MOI axis, and here I've listed the things that come into play, and it's like you've got the mass and the moment of inertia. Those are your two inertia terms. CG location, that's really important, but different CG locations work for some people and others they don't. So
you can move back and forward to change spin and launch.
Exactly.
And then right and left for fade and slice, basically.
Exactly. Then you've got the roll and bulge. So as you change the MOI, you're these two are kind of linked together. So these two interact. This interacts.
Give me 1 second on the roll and bulge. How are they interacting? Because the off-center hit is being offset by the curvature of the face.
So if you have lower MOI, you're going to have more gear effect, and so you might
more
roll and bulge.
Right. So you remember the old wooden drivers, right? They had a huge roll and bulge. They were small. They had a weight in the center. Really low MOI, by the way, with that big lead weight underneath the sole. So you needed a lot of roll and bulge because if you hit off center, it twisted a lot. So it's offline right. So you need a lot of spin to get it back the other way. And the same obviously is true for the heel.
Yeah.
As they got bigger and the MOI has gotten better, higher and higher, this is flattened out over time. And then you've got companies that have changed the topography of the face. It's not
Right.
just, used to be a separate number for roll and a separate number for bulge in the old wooden drivers. And then they all kind of went to like a radius. So it was all the same in every direction. And now all the companies have messed with all of that as well and changed the shaping of the thing to adjust for it. So
Yeah.
there's no right or wrong. It's just a
It's
lot of
just
different ways of doing it.
This is the space that they're confined in to hit points that are going to suit large portions of the market.
Right, and and the computer analysis has allowed them to go down these rabbit holes
Right.
and dig deep into this stuff. Because Mark mentions I have face topology here. There's a lot of different things that people are playing with on that. Then you've got face flexure.
This is where like AI faces are thinner here and thicker here, and the ball's
Exactly.
springing off at different speeds.
Yeah.
Cal has
Exactly.
done that with AI and all different shapes underneath. Taylormade's got different weights underneath, different shapes. So there's lots of different things you can do with that as well.
So are those two linked to each other? How are these links working here?
So I think that ultimately you want the ball. It's all about the ball. We're
Right.
talking club. It's
That's
all
why
about
we do
what that
robot
ball
testing at
does
the
when
end.
it leaves the club.
Right.
And so these are all things that affect how that ball leaves the club head. And so for different people, you're going to have different designs that will work. And also I've got down here the structural flexing, because companies now are looking at, if you've ever seen one of these in slow motion, this whole thing sort of breathes and pushes. It's not just a local face flexure. And then so they're making that whole structure respond, and then they're doing little areas here. They're worried about what's happening in this area and what's happening in the whole structure. And so it's a great time to buy a driver.
Right.
I'm telling you, the technology that's into them is really outstanding. But again, all of these parameters here, it's all about the ball and how it comes off of there.
And ultimately, I mean, that's why S3 technology exists, right? Is we're doing the hard yards. I say we, the royal we. Tom and Mark predominantly are doing the hard yards in the research and development, and you're finding out these finite terms, and then we get it on the robot, and we start seeing what the ball does in the air and mapping those results, which you say ultimately is the most important. But really, the most important is then, our Cool Club services, our fitting services, and getting people in the store, because we can have all of this, and it is a great time to buy a driver. But you've got to like the look of it, the feel of it, the sound of it.
The single reason we do all this work to kind of categorize drivers and stuff is so that you, the fitters, can narrow it down really quickly. Because everyone talks about having 6,000 or 10,000 or 50,000, demos and all. You can't hit them all.
Right.
You're worn out by the third one. So we're just trying to narrow that down and know, these kind of people tend to like these, and at least it gives the fitter more information to help narrow that down faster.
There's no way you're going to come out here and hit 100 drivers. And if you had to hit 10 balls with every driver on the market, you're going to have to hit probably more than 100 drivers nowadays.
Right.
Because you're hitting every family on your graph from 5, 6,
And then
7
don't think about
manufacturers.
changing the shafts on them or the settings.
Yeah,
We haven't even millions of combinations.
We haven't gone down the rabbit hole of what the shaft does in there just yet.
Oh yeah.
Whole other deal.
But yeah, the robot tests and it does the same swing every time, but then you bring a player in and they have to swing that. So they might perceive the differences. It may not just be look. There might be a subtle feel that's not right for them by changing the inertia terms that are in there.
We've seen
And that's one thing the robot doesn't do, right? The robot's fixed. It's not moving at all.
Right.
Whereas a different CG might make a player do something different. It's not necessarily going to affect the robot so much.
Right.
And we've seen a few tour players this year alone with this driver technology slide back up that graph. Predominantly tour players, we've always been I'm in the low spin option, the low MOI, the
You
low
see
CG.
a lot more tour players playing than not necessarily the small version, right? A lot with the middle and even some of the bigger ones. So it's pretty spread out on tour.
And I think this conversation continues next time down those roads of like, okay, well, what are these things doing to ball flight? How are these families of golf club, with some actual numbers from yourself, on the products, to look at how that changes and why a player might be choosing one over another. We can bring some robot data in there.
Yep.
And I think that was a really good kickstart to help people understand how much work really goes into not just what we're doing here, but what the OEMs are doing.
Yeah,
for the average
we're going to
golfer.
list a lot of these numbers. We want people that understand is, don't go by this and say, I need the most forgiving one, because that may not be the right answer.
Right.
It's a combination of all of them.
Yeah. Well, check out the rest of our channel. Thank you, Tom Mase. Thank you, Mark Timms.
Pleasure.
We're going to continue this conversation. S3 technology is going to be pumping through the summer with more data than you can ever imagine. Stick with us. Keep your eyes on us. We are going to give you the best information and help you buy the golf clubs that are going to help you play better golf.